Hi, and welcome to January's ITA Clean Sport Education webinar. I'm Lisa. I'm a member of the education team at the ITA, and I'm delighted to present this month's topic, Clean Sport 101, alongside our guest panelists, Anita Hartung and Florence Schelling. Let's take a quick moment to meet them. Hi, Anita.
Hi.
And Florence should be joining us in just a moment. Hi, Florence. Thank you both for being here with us today. So before we get started, Anita, do you mind giving us a brief introduction?
Sure. So I'm Anita Hartung from Hungary, and I'm a former professional basketball player, having competed in NCAA Division I basketball, FIBA EuroLeague, and FIBA EuroCup Women. My journey actually extends beyond playing. I also hold experience in coaching and managing basketball teams. Currently, I'm working as a sport manager for the Rhine Ruhr 2025 FISU World University Games, and also very proud of my role as an ITA Education Ambassador. Happy to be here today and excited to go through some essential clean sport topics.
All right, thanks, Anita. And it'll be good to have your perspective as not only an athlete, but also as a coach and a manager as well. And we also have Florence, who's with us as well. Florence, do you mind giving us a brief introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. Hi, everyone. My name is Florence Schelling. I'm a retired ice hockey goalie from Switzerland. I participated at 4 Olympic Games and was very fortunate to be a medalist as well. We won the bronze medal at the Sochi 2014 Olympics. On top of that, I represented Switzerland at 11 World Championships, and there I was fortunate enough to medal as well. And I'm part of the Swiss Olympic Athletes Commission. And like Anita, I extended my sporting career as well in terms of I was a coach and I was also working in management. And I've been an ambassador for the ITA for the past 2 years. And I'm super excited to be here today with you and share my knowledge and experience with all of you, and looking forward to answering your questions at the end.
All right, thank you, Florence. So please feel free to take a break for the moment, and we'll call you in later on to join us. And so really impressive resumes that and backgrounds that you both have. Thank you for being with us today. And so for those of you who are joining us today, in order for us to get the most out of today's webinar, we at ITA, we are offering you simultaneous translation in Arabic, French, Russian, and Spanish. Please feel free to leave any comments in the chat box. Share with us where you're from, what your role is, if you're an athlete, athlete support personnel, if you represent NATO. We also have a question and answer function. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A function. Please feel free to drop a question there and we will get back to you with an answer. We will try to address as many questions as we can at the end of today's session during our Q&A. And throughout today's session, we also have a third component that we call polls. So periodically, you'll see a poll question come up on your screen, and you'll have multiple choices to select from. So when those come, you'll be prompted, and I'm curious to see what your knowledge is already of anti-doping. And a final reminder that we are recording the session for later purposes. So thank you everyone for being here today. Super excited to get through some of the basics of Clean Sport 101 with you. And I'm also pleased to offer our thanks to our official presenting partner, Informed Sport. With Informed Sport support, we are able to deliver these monthly webinars free of charge to the Clean Sport community across 5 languages. And of course, the big thank you to all of you who are joining us today. We are here to kick off the year with an overview of some of the key information when it comes to anti-doping, namely athlete rights and responsibilities and anti-doping, an introduction of what doping is, and how it is that we can check our medications and arm ourselves with the know-how to ensure that we don't inadvertently dope. And with that, we'll also look at some of the key risks of supplements and how to minimize those risks. And then we'll jump right into the doping control process. And we're lucky to have Florence, who's been tested a number of times, and she'll share her experience with us. And this will help us make sure that we know what to expect if and when you are when you are notified of being selected for doping control. Importantly, at the end of each section, we will also leave you with links to important resources where you can learn more about each of these topics. Please feel free to take notes during the session, but know that we will also send the slides upon close of the session. All right, so to get on with it, I'm sure you're aware that athletes have responsibilities when it comes to anti-doping and the promotion of fair and clean sport. But what often receives less attention is the fact that athletes also have rights. So the first item on our agenda is twofold, and it's athlete rights and responsibilities when it comes to anti-doping. So let's get started with a poll. You'll see a question appear on your screen, and you will have four answers, that you can select from. With this question, you can select as many as you believe are correct. So let's see what the question is. The first poll question is, what is a fundamental right that athletes have in anti-doping? Again, please feel free to select all that apply, and don't worry, your answers are anonymous. Nobody's going to know what you're guessing. And feel free to guess 1, 2, 3, or 4. Right. Okay, with lots of answers coming in, it seems that everybody's pretty much on board with, or being in agreement, that all 4 of these are actually within the athlete's rights, and they include right to data protection, right to equitable and fair doping control process, right to education, and an equal opportunity in competition. So let's look at what the rest of these are as well. So the document you see in the middle of this page is called the Athletes Anti-Doping Rights Act. And this document ensures that all athletes' rights within anti-doping are clearly explained, accessible, and universally applicable. So all the stakeholders in the anti-doping system have a responsibility to know and also promote them. So we'll share a QR code to this document later, but let's have a quick run through. First, we have equality of opportunity, which basically states that clean athletes have the right to compete against other clean athletes. The second you see here is the right to equitable and fair testing programs. And then the third, which is the right to medical treatment and the protection of health rights. Athletes also have the right to justice, which includes a fair hearing with an independent panel, and also the right to accountability. And then there's the right to education, which we're all exercising here today. And before that, there's also the whistleblower rights, which is the right to access anonymous or confidential mechanisms to report any potential or actual doping. Numbers 8 through 14 include the right to data protection, which we all know from the trivia question we just had, and the right to compensation, which is relevant if we think about what's called the medal reallocation or prize money. The protected persons rights mainly refers to minors, and the full definition is available in the Rights Act document. Then we come to the rights during sample collection. We'll touch on these more when we go through the doping control process later in this presentation, and that's when we'll also explain what the B sample is. And the final points here, relate to the other rights and freedoms not being affected and application and standing. So with that, let's get on to what the athlete responsibilities are. And these are important and quite straightforward. First and foremost, it's an athlete's responsibility to know and follow the rules, like the rules of the sport and also the rules of the global anti-doping system that we talk about today. Athletes are responsible for being available for sample collection when requested, be that in competition and also out of competition, and also to inform medical personnel like doctors of your obligations as an athlete. This is especially important if you're prescribed any medications or treatment. Also included in the responsibilities is the cooperation with anti-doping organizations and to avoid cooperation with banned support personnel. Where it says to take responsibility for what you ingest, this is directly related to what we call the principle of strict liability, and we'll cover that in a short bit. But it's basically explaining that the athlete is 100% responsible for the substances that are in his or her body. And of course, it goes without saying that the athlete entourage and other members of the sporting system have an obligation to inform their athletes of these rights and responsibilities. So it's great to know that we have participants from so many roles with us today. And with that in mind, I'm going to ask Anita to join us again and share. Anita, I'm curious if you can share with us your thoughts on the importance of athlete support personnel in the promotion of clean sport values for athletes.
Sure, Lisa. I think we can all agree, and drawing from personal experiences, that athlete support personnel play a crucial and highly influential role in an athlete's life in every stage of the athlete pathway. This is no different when it comes to clean sport values. They have the power to positively or negatively influence athletes' doping-related decisions. Coaches, in particular, play a crucial role in shaping athletes' values, decision-making, and character due to the amount of time they spend together with an athlete and the relationship dynamic they share. I strongly believe that good coaches are mentors and role models. They are well aware of their influential power, and they use it wisely both on and off the court.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Anita. And your athletes are lucky to have you. So with that, let's move on to what we have here is the Anti-Doping Rights Act. And this is the QR code that will take you directly to the document. So again, we'll be sharing these slides as a PDF later on, so you can have it for easy reference later. And that wraps up our overview of the athlete rights and responsibilities. And so what we're going to do now is move on to the next question: what is doping? So let's kick this off with another poll. The 4 letters you see here, ADRV, are really important when it comes to clean sport. But my question is, do you know what this means? So let's give it a try. Again, same with the last question. All answers are anonymous. For this question, there's only one right answer. So feel free to just take a guess if you feel like you have no idea. And the options are anti-drug rule violation, the first one, anti-drug regulation violation. The second is anti-doping rule violation. The third is atypical doping results verdict. And the fourth one is anti-doping rules verdict. Okay. And as most of you have already guessed, this was a difficult one, especially if we don't have a background in anti-doping in sport. But the correct answer to this one is the anti-doping rule violation. So let's learn more about this. What we see here is the WADA definition of doping. So basically, in the World Anti-Doping Code, doping is defined as the occurrence of one or more ADRVs. And here we see that they're set forth in Articles 2.1 through 2.11, meaning that there are 11 ADRVs in total, which in fact comes as quite a surprise to many. So let's have a look at these 11. And Anita, if you can join us again and walk us through what these 11 ADRVs are.
Sure. So here on this slide, you can see all 11 ADRVs. Important to note that the first 4 apply only to athletes, and the 5th through 11 apply to both athletes and athlete support personnel. The first 4 ADRVs apply only to athletes, and they are related to athletes' testing and sample collection. These are the presence of a prohibited substance in an athlete's sample, the use or attempted use of a prohibited substance or method, evading, refusing, or failing to submit to sample collection, and whereabouts failure. Now, regarding whereabouts, unfortunately today we don't have sufficient time to go through every single detail, but if you are a member of the registered testing pool, make sure you check out ITA's YouTube channel and Athlete Hub, where you can find more information regarding whereabouts. Now back to ADRVs. The next 7, ADRV 2.5 through 2.11, are for all athletes, athlete support personnel, and officials. The 5th on the list is tampering with any part of the doping control process. For example, breaking a bottle during a sample collection. As for the prohibited substances and methods, it is considered a rule violation to possess, traffic, administer, or attempt to administer a prohibited substance or method. 9th on the list is complicity or attempted complicity, as well as the 10th, prohibited association by an athlete or other person. This means, for example, if a coach has been sanctioned, an athlete is not allowed to work with that coach. The 11th on the list is an act by an athlete or another person to discourage or retaliate against reporting doping to authorities. Each of these are very important to keep in mind, as it is so often thought that doping or committing an anti-doping rule violation is solely about a substance in an athlete's sample. However, as we can see it here, it is a lot more far-reaching than this, and it applies to more people than just athletes. To learn more about each of these ADRVs, you can watch a webinar that ITA hosted last year that was dedicated to this very topic. With this being said, let's focus on the most common ADRV 2.1 related to the presence of a prohibited substance, in other words, a positive test. Early in the session, Lisa touched upon the principle of strict liability, and she will explain it to us now.
All right, thanks, Anita. Definitely a lot to keep in mind. So the principle of strict liability is the idea or the notion that when there's a positive sample, regardless of how the substance gets into an athlete's system, it is the athlete who will be solely responsible for an anti-doping rule violation, regardless of whether there was an intention to cheat or not, or if the athlete is at fault. And by this point, some of you may have the question, but how do I know what's prohibited and what's not? Well, the answer is in a document that we call the WADA Prohibited List. The document you see here is the official prohibited list. This is a document of not only substances, but also methods that is updated at least annually, and the new list comes into effect on the 1st of January each year. The QR code in the bottom of this page will take you directly to the 2024 prohibited list. And again, don't worry, these slides will be sent as PDF later, so you can have this for reference as well. And the 3 points that we have on this page outline the types of substances and methods that are on the prohibited list. They include those that are prohibited at all times, those that are prohibited only during in-competition periods, and those that are prohibited only in particular sports. And just as a side note, we had an informative webinar just a couple months ago that covered this in quite detail. So now it's on our ITA YouTube channel, so you can watch it at any time. And now, knowing that substances and methods are listed on the prohibited list, that's one thing. But Anita, how can an athlete or a member of the athlete entourage check them?
Lucky for us, there are a few ways, so let's walk through them now. There are a few resources we can talk through, but we always recommend speaking to your team doctor, pharmacist, or contact your national anti-doping organization. Always remember that a general pharmacist may not have the sufficient knowledge of the prohibited list. So, for example, if you are consulting a pharmacist when buying a medication, make sure you ask them to point out the medical ingredients listed on the packaging and to check them with you against the prohibited list. There are also various national anti-doping organization-specific tools, So please always consult with them for specific advice for medications bought in your country. A number of NADOs use GlobalDRO. GlobalDRO is an online database based on the most current version of the World Anti-Doping Code. So let's see how it works by watching a short video.
This is a quick demonstration about how to search for a medication online to see if it is permitted for you to use as an athlete. Go to globaldro.com. For the purpose of this video, select that you are in the UK. Tell the service that you are an athlete. Tell the service the sport you compete in. And then enter the name of the product you intend to use. Look at the results for the specific product or brand that you would like to take. In this instance, let's say you're looking up cortisone, which can be an ingredient in different medications. This step, you're looking at several pieces of information. The first thing is to check the route of administration, so whether it should be taken orally, inhaled, or applied topically. And as a reminder, with any medication, you should only use it as advised to be used. The next thing that you really need to pay attention to are the in-competition and out-of-competition periods. Sometimes it can be hours before an event, so it is really important that you do know the definition of the in-competition period of your sport. Now, this example tells me that the substance of interest is not allowed in the in-competition period by intramuscular injection, intravenous injection, a local injection into a joint, bursa, or tendon, not swallowed or applied in the mouth, and not an rectal application. However, inhalation, nasal, ophthalmic, optic, and topical administration can be used in the in-competition period. On the other hand, all routes of administration are allowed during the out-of-competition period. Make sure to always check the conditions of use at the bottom of the page. For example, for cortisone and other glucocorticoids, WADA has defined a washout period for the out-of-competition use of glucocorticoids. If you have any doubts about the process at all, please ask our ITA Education Ambassador for assistance.
Okay, so Anita, you can join me again. What we're going to do is, it's one thing to see the video, video tutorial of what the GlobalDRO website can do for us. It's another thing to actually put it into practice. So if you have, for our participants who are with us today, if you have your phone with you, we're going to start by asking you to take a moment to scan the QR code that you see on this screen. This should take you directly to the GlobalDRO website. After you've done that, for the sake of this exercise, please select the UK as the country per the video that we just watched. And then select that you are an athlete. And then select a sport. Give a minute to get through this. Okay, so let's give this a try. For those of you who are in the site, the GlobalDRO site, we're going to start with a common medication. This one is branded Tylenol. Now, the important thing that we need to make sure we look for is the name of the medical ingredient that's contained within the product. In this example, let's take a quick moment to see if you can identify what is in this what this is in the medication. So take a moment to see if you can figure out what the medical ingredient is in this picture. And if you guessed acetaminophen, you are correct. So we have acetaminophen as the active ingredient. So let's give everyone a few seconds to type this ingredient, it's a long one, into the search for space on the GlobalDRO site to see what it says regarding if the substance is prohibited at all times, prohibited in competition only, prohibited in certain doses, or not prohibited in sport. Feel free to add it in the chat if you think you have an answer. All right, so when we search for acetaminophen on the GlobalDRO, what we should see as the result should look like this. We see that acetaminophen is both permitted at all times, which includes in competition and out of competition. So when you check a substance on the GlobalDRO, it will outline for you the route of administration and if it's prohibited in competition or out of competition. So let's try to get one more medication for practice. What we have next is a medication that can be bought over the counter. So no prescriptions required. And so it's relatively easy to get. And you can see that the label states that the medication provides relief from cold symptoms like a runny nose and congestion. So take a quick moment to see if you can guess what the active ingredient is in this one. Feel free to put it in the chat and help out the other participants if you think you can figure out what the active ingredient is in this picture. All right, some answers are coming in, doing great. Okay, let's go ahead and check ephedrine in the GlobalDRO website. And for those of you who may be having difficulty finding it, it's in the blue box on the picture right now. Okay, so when we type ephedrine into the GlobalDRO, what we see is, oh, it's prohibited in competition, but it's not prohibited out of competition. So this is a perfect example of how carefully you need to check all of your medications before use. Even those that you can buy over the counter for a cold can contain prohibited substances. Furthermore, athletes must remember that even if a substance is permitted out of competition, they might still test positive for the substance during an in-competition test, and this will be treated as an anti-doping rule violation. For example, taking the citrus decongestant the evening prior to a competition may result in a positive test, and because of the principle of strict liability, which we talked about earlier, this means that even if a substance is allowed out of competition, athletes must still make sure the substance will not be present in their bodies when they compete. So, of course, there can be times when athletes need to take a prohibited substance for various health reasons, and the anti-doping rules clearly outline the criteria and the process that allows for this. And this is what we call a therapeutic use exemption, also TUE for short. And with that, let's move on from this to briefly cover supplements. But sorry, before that, what we have here are 3 QR codes. Again, these will be sent after the close of the presentation today for you to have ease of reference. And this will be information on TUEs, therapeutic use exemptions, a link to a webinar on TUEs that we have on our YouTube channel, and also information on how to check your medications. So with that, let's move on to the next topic, which is supplements. So before we start this, we're going to do a quick poll. The next poll question is, do you or athletes you know or work with use supplements? Again, your responses are anonymous. You can choose from yes, no, or I don't know. All right. So over half of you have responded, and of the half that have responded, more than half use supplements. So let's, with that, it's easy to see a lot of people take supplements. So for those of you who don't, it's still really important that you're informed in this area. So Anita's going to join us again and take us through some of the key risks that are associated with taking supplements.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. A very important topic indeed. The appropriate use of some supplements can benefit some athletes, however, only when the athlete has received expert advice tailored to their personal and athletic needs. However, it's very important to note that no supplement is 100% risk-free. Always keep this in mind. This is actually one of ITA's most requested topics to discuss, and we will leave you with plenty of resources where you can find and learn more. Because the supplement industry is not well regulated, there are many supplement products are mislabeled. The ingredients may not be properly listed, and the supplement may contain a prohibited substance that is not listed on the label. Another real risk is what we call contamination. There is often a high risk of contamination with a prohibited substance at the production facility where your product is made. This information will also not be on the label. And of course, it's crucial that we remember that supplements can pose health risks. You may accidentally be ingesting substances that are on the prohibited list, and these may be harmful to your health.
All right, so these are all really important points, Anita, and I think we're all aware of the reality that some athletes are going to take supplements. So are there ways to seek out supplements that are going to be safer?
There are. If an athlete is going to use a supplement, it's important to use products from reputable companies and those that have been tested by an independent company, not those affiliated with the actual supplement producer. So there are many independent companies that test supplements around the world, and here you can see some that ITA recommends. We always advise athletes to check with the National Anti-Doping Organization for recommendation, because there might be a country and language specific tool that will best suit your needs.
Okay, really helpful reminders and tips, Anita. Thank you. Time for you to take a rest, so please feel free to turn off the camera and we'll invite you back for the question and answer. And on that note, if you have any questions for our athlete panelists on their experiences, please feel free to add it to the question and answer box. I'm seeing some good questions that have come in, and it's also good to see everybody's engaged in the chat box as well. So on this slide, what we see, there are a lot of resources out there to help you navigate the topic of supplements, including a number of webinars that we've held at ITA. So we invite you to learn more by scanning either of these QR codes, where we have covered the topic from a food-first approach with nutritionists to discussing what we call batch-tested supplements with experts. So we've covered a lot in a little bit of time, and it's time now to transition to our final topic for today, which is what we call the doping control process. So I'd like to invite Florence to join us for the next section. Hey, Florence. Okay, so for this part of our conversation today, Florence is going to share her experience with us. And what we see here are the 7 key steps of the doping control process. Today, we're going to cover the first 5 steps. The first one is athlete selection. So Florence, would you mind sharing with us how the athlete selection process actually works?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. So there's basically 3 criteria on how an athlete can be selected for the doping control. The first one being based on their performance on the field of play. So top performing athletes can be selected. The second category is random selection. This can be any athlete during a competition. It is most common to not only test the highly successful athletes, but also random athletes. And then the third category is the targeted for a specific reason category. When I talk about this basically is that a specific athlete has been targeted based on something that has been seen or reported and stuff like that. So those are very specific reasons why an athlete can be targeted. And basically those are the three reasons why an athlete can be selected for doping control.
Ah, all right. Thanks for outlining that, Florence. Makes enough sense. So then another question I have for you on the note of athlete selection is, who can actually test the athletes?
Very good question, and actually a question that I get a lot when I do clean sport education. So there are quite a few different entities that can test athletes. You see them on the slides. There's national anti-doping organizations, the international federations, major event organizers, or then delegated third parties like the International Testing Agency that can test those athletes. And going into the next question right away, who can be tested? It's basically any athlete under the jurisdiction of anti-doping organizations and athletes that are subject to their anti-doping rules.
Okay, thanks for covering that for us. So then how about we move to the next step, which is going to be athlete notification. So Florence, given your experience as an athlete, do you have any memories you'd like to share with us about your first time being notified?
Absolutely. My first time being notified was actually at my first World Championship that I played when I was 13 years old. And I was part of the senior team at the time. And I was really just like a baby amongst the team. And I kind of slid into the team and like everything was overwhelming. And at the end of, I believe it was my first game that I played, I was notified that I've been selected for a doping control process, and it was basically one of my worst experience that I've had because I wasn't prepared, I wasn't educated. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, what my rights and responsibilities were, and so on. And I remember that my team doctor, he was with me at the time when the notification process happened, because on top of all of that, my English wasn't too good at the time either. So I had a hard time understanding what was going on and what I needed to do. And so he would follow me, but he was new too, so he didn't really know everything in detail as well. So after I was notified, basically we went straight to the doping control station, and I was in my full gear, like my entire goalie equipment. I had that on, and then I thought I had to go pee right away, but I couldn't because I literally just went to pee in the last intermission of the game. So I was just sitting there in my full equipment, and I couldn't pee, and I was just drinking water, and I just felt miserable because I didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know how I could have done things differently and better. And then at one point, actually, the opponent came in into the doping control station, and she was, in her regular shorts and t-shirts, had her accreditation. She literally came in, she was like, all right, I'm ready to pee. She went into the stall, and like she was in and out of there within like 10 minutes max. And I was sitting there for hours. And overall, it was just like a really bad experience. And I wish I would have known all the stuff that I know now and the stuff that I get to educate other athletes on back then.
Wow, what an experience. And I'm really sorry to hear that was such a stressful thing to go through, especially as such a young athlete. Although I think it highlights the importance of, yes, definitely the athletes knowing their rights and responsibilities especially during the doping control process, but also how important it is, because you said that you had your medical personnel with you. It's also important that athlete entourage are fully aware of what the processes are and what the rights and responsibilities are of athletes too. And on that note, could you walk us through some of the rights that athletes have during the doping control process?
Absolutely. So looking at the rights, and like I said before, I wish I would have known that when back then when I was tested for the first time. And also you just stressed that, Lisa, in terms of how important it is for the athlete support personnel to know those rights and responsibilities as well, so that they can support the athletes that are not quite as well in that topic as they should, or if it's their first time, they're nervous and so on. So this is really important. But so looking at the rights, and you can see that on your screens, you have the right to have a representative with you. So throughout my entire career, whenever I was selected, I had my doctor or my physiotherapist come with me. You also have the right to request an interpreter if one is available, or you can also request special assistant for valid reasons. At all times during the whole process, you can ask any questions that are going through your head. And I can't stress this enough, because a lot of times you're nervous, you're just there and you wonder certain things, and you're not asking questions, but your head is like going crazy, and you're thinking all those things. So like really understand that you have the right to ask as many questions as you want, any questions at all. And then also you have the right to ask for chaperones or DCO's identification. Like we covered before, there are many different entities that can do the testing, so that you know who's testing you in or out of competition. And then in the end, ultimately, you can record any comments or concern on the form, which we're going to cover in a little bit as well. And lastly, you can request a delay for a valid reason.
Okay, these are all really, really important points to keep in mind for when an athlete is notified that they've been selected for doping control. And I want to highlight the last one here, which is that you just mentioned, to request a delay for valid reasons. So is any reason valid? Can I say, oh, I just got the gold medal, I want to go celebrate with my family?
Ultimately, it is up to the DCO to decide if the reason is valid. However, we do have valid reasons, such as attending a victory ceremony. This is a valid reason for a delay of testing, or finishing a training session, or if you have another competition coming up right away, you can delay your testing then. Also, if you need medical attention right after you've been notified, you can request that so that your doping control process will be delayed. Also, media commitment is very, very important also, so you can request that. And then also ultimately, like the cooling down is a valid reason that you can do that. So in my case, the last part would have been it, like going back into the locker room, knowing that the chaperone or DCO will be following me at all times, having myself in sight, but that this is okay to do, going back into the locker room, getting changed, grabbing your accreditation, going through all the media stuff and everything. But ultimately, it is really up to the DCO or the chaperone to decide whether your reason is valid or not.
Okay. Okay, so then could you run us through, since we went through the rights of the athlete, and those rights include request a valid reason to request a delay, can you run us through what the responsibilities are too?
Absolutely. So we do have different responsibilities. Once we have been notified, we have to immediately report to testing. Full stop. Of course, again, if we have a valid reason for the day, this is when it's going to happen. But our responsibility is that we have to immediately report to testing if we have been selected. And then we have to show valid identification through passport, identification, accreditation, whatever was decided to be a valid identification for this event. A lot of times, or at least in ice hockey, it was our accreditation that we got from the World Championships organizing committee, or then at the Olympic Games, it was just the accreditation, the athlete's accreditation that was a valid identification. And then I mentioned that before, you have to remain in direct sight of the DCO or the chaperone at all times. They have to see you. They have to see, basically follow you around in every step that you take. And then comply with the sample collection procedure. This is ultimately our responsibilities as athletes that we have to follow.
Okay. All right. Thanks for walking us through the rights and responsibilities, Florence. I think we have a better picture of what those are as it relates to the doping control process. And as you just mentioned, it's a responsibility to comply with the sample collection procedure. So on that note, that's what we're going to cover next, which is sample collection. So what we see on the screen will walk us through the different steps for a urine sample collection. So Florence, my understanding is when you were 13, this is what you had. So if you could walk us through what the steps are for this one.
Absolutely. So basically, once you arrive to the doping control station, you are being presented with a set of collection vessels, and you pick your lucky vessel, the lucky vessel that's gonna get you up to 90 milliliters of pee. No, but like you collect your vessel, you make sure that you check everything, that it has not been tampered with, that nothing's been broken or open. Like you look very closely at the collection vessel, and then you take that and then you go into the bathroom or the stall or whatever they have available there, and then like you wash your hands, making sure that you know everything that you touch cannot be contaminated, and then you provide your sample while the chaperone or DCO is watching you very, very closely, and we'll go into the details of that in a little bit. And then once this collection has been taking place, we are again being presented with different sample collection kits. There again, we pick our lucky kit. We look at it, has it been tampered with? Has it been opened or anything? And we do want to make sure that if there's anything that we see there, that we can note this on the doping control form, if there's anything that you feel was a bit sketchy or anything done right. But in the end, like we want to have a collection kit that is fully sealed, everything looking perfectly brand new and unopened. So we collect that, and then we open everything up. We check the barcodes. Is everything the same? Are the barcodes the same? Even the bottles, you know, do they have the red ring around the bottles? We just have to check literally everything. And then basically we take the collection vessel and we fill up the different sample bottles of the collection kit.
Okay. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for walking us through that. So I think it's important to note that when an athlete provides a sample, the doping control officer, as you mentioned, it can be a very intimate experience with the doping control officer watching the passing of the sample. So as you can see on the slide. So Florence, for an athlete, for anybody actually, this isn't going to be the most comfortable of experiences. So do you have any tips for how to make this a little more comfortable for athletes?
Absolutely. And again, like I know a lot of athletes struggle with that. But the more doping controls you have, the easier it gets, just because you get used to it. But for me, it's all about like just relaxing. And I kept telling myself, whoever the person is that is watching me pee, I'm pretty sure never in my entire life going to see that person again. So that's something that I kept telling myself, and I was just like, like relax, because if you don't relax, you can't pee. It's just going to take much longer, instead of just like relaxing for a short time, a short amount of time, letting letting the pee go and then being done within a couple of minutes instead of taking much longer. And then ultimately it takes as long as it takes. So do never ever feel pressured to be like, oh, you have to be in and out of there in no time. No, sometimes you can't pee right away, sometimes you can't. And if you can't, there's always beverages available at the doping control station. So you can drink water. Make sure that you drink slowly, not too quickly, because then we don't want to dilute the pee too much, so that we have to pee again because it's too diluted, and all that stuff. So it's literally that, like, the easier, like, I know it's not the most comfortable, but in the end it's part of being an athlete. It's a responsibility that we have, and we all want to be performing in clean sports, and going through that is just part of it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And then that brings us to the fourth step, which is the doping control form. So on that note, Florence, do you mind walking us through just very briefly the top points to keep in mind when filling out the doping control form?
Yes. So the doping control form is a standardized form. Pretty much every time you're going to go to a doping control, you will see the same kind of form. The athletes needs to fill in his or her personal information, make sure you read the rights and responsibilities, and then again, check the sample codes on the vessels that need to make sure that those are all aligned. Declare all the medication and supplements that you've taken previously of the doping control, and then you just report your comments that you have, and review everything, just like we did back in school when we took an exam. We go through the questions again, we look, have we filled out everything, have we missed anything? So you do exactly the same with the doping control form, and then you sign it and you're done.
Okay, so it sounds quick and painless, but it sounds like the most important thing is to make sure that you really double check everything to make sure it's accurate. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Florence. And so you can stay with us, because this brings us to the final step that we're going to talk about today, which is the chain of custody. So it's a fair question to wonder what happens to my sample once I've handed it over. And simply put, the samples are securely packaged and sent to a WADA accredited laboratory for analysis. So that basically wraps up our coverage of the doping control process. Thank you, Florence, for sharing your experience. What we have here are some key takeaways that we need to keep in mind in order to exercise your rights and responsibilities during the doping control process. Make sure you always follow the doping control officer or chaperone, and to always double check the information that goes onto the doping control form. So moving on then, as with previous topics, we're leaving you with plenty of places to find more information. The video is courtesy of our colleagues at the video that you will reach through scanning this QR code is courtesy of our colleagues at the Japanese Anti-Doping Organization. And as it's a manga cartoon, anyone can watch it irrespective of the language you speak, and it will walk you through each of the steps for the doping control process. We've also linked to a lot of our resources already throughout the session. Here, I'll leave you with a few more, including the Athlete Hub section of our ITA website and the contacts for NADOs, which are National Anti-Doping Organizations. And if you'd like to test your knowledge further, WADA has an e-learning platform that's called ADEL. It's free to use, and it has a number of courses for athletes. Not only athletes, but also for coaches and medical personnel. And we really recommend taking some of the courses, and they're also available in multiple languages. And so for the last 5 minutes, this brings us to our question and answer time. So we already have a couple questions in the Q&A. If you have other questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to put them in. Feel free to ask Florence and Anita anything about their experiences as athletes, as coaches, as managers when it comes to their anti-doping experience. And so with the first question that we have come in, we have a question from Abraham. So when it comes to, do we have testing agents in all countries? So to address that question, I'd like to say, when it comes to doping control officers, each testing authority defines its doping control officer as a part of the strategy, or what we call the test distribution planning in each mission or event. And testing takes place all around the world for all athletes. So I'm curious, Florence, do you know how many countries you've been tested in?
I actually was thinking about it as I was reading that question, and I have no idea.
No idea.
I have no idea, but I would
more
have
than just
said
one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would have said I actually have no idea. A lot.
That's fair. Another question that we have, and I think this is really relevant, is it necessary for teen athletes to register a TUE? Now, remember, a TUE is a therapeutic use exemption. And yes, athletes need to apply for a TUE irrespective of their age. What's important to keep in mind is that it's the level of the athlete, and therefore, depending on the level of the athlete, this will dictate to whom they should apply for the TUE. In the first case, reach out to your national anti-doping organization for more information. And we also have resources at the ITA on our website. It's called the TUE Assistant. And this is a guide that can walk you through step-by-step, asking questions to see if you fall into the category of needing to apply for a TUE. And another question from Levan is, can an athlete be tested at any time? And the answer to that one is simple. I see Anita and Florence nodding their heads, and I'm going to join. Yes, an athlete can be tested anytime. So another question. Anita or Florence, I guess I'd pass a question to both of you. Do you have any feedback on what your experiences have been being tested in other countries?
I do have experience, and I was tested in the United States when I joined the team, college basketball, and it was the first time for me when I was tested. It was very, like Florence said, I was young. I didn't know what was going on. We didn't have education, so I was very happy to read about the questions about teen athletes, and I'm happy that we have colleagues from youth sports. And it's very important that we know that we're not only educating senior athletes, but we also start education early.
Okay. Thanks. All right, then to wrap it up, we'll do one final question, which is from Biren. And the question is, do you have to have a great performance to be tested, or is it just randomly picked? So to review the answer to this one, there are 3 circumstances that can warrant being selected for doping control. The first is performance-based. The second is random selection. And the third is targeted selection. So both of the options in the question, performance-based and random selection, and then there's a third, which is targeted. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. We have people from all over the world, all different sports, all different disciplines. A special shout out to Florence and Anita for joining us. Thank you everyone for taking your time to be with us for the January monthly webinar. Please note that after the webinar ends, you will automatically be redirected to a survey. It would be really helpful if you could take a couple minutes to fill this out, because your feedback is really important to us. We take it into consideration as we plan future webinars. And please note that your submission is completely anonymous. We won't know who says what. You will receive a copy of the slides after the webinar via email, and this will include all of the QR codes and all of the links for additional resources. And that's a wrap for today. Again, thank you, Anita. Thank you, Florence, for being with us, being our panelists today. And another thank you to all of you for your attention and your active participation. We hope you found this session valuable, and please stay tuned for more information on the upcoming monthly webinars.